Shana Tova to everybody. Shabbat Shalom, Tina. Great to see you. So even though we were all together last Friday night, we didn't get to see you. We imagined you were there. So feel free to wish one another a Shabbat Shalom in the chat. It's always great to see wishes of greetings and wishes to one another. Beryl, Shabbat Shalom, welcome. Hey Beryl, good to see you. On or not, we see you there. So Shabbat Shalom, Miriam and Brian and Sarah, I'm assuming as well. Shabbat Shalom, Linda. We're glad to see all of you. This aspiration as we move through these days of awe. May our hearts be really filled with this hopefulness that we can contribute, be builders in this world, and start from a place of chesed, from a place of open-heartedness.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to services. It's so great to see you. This is, if you don't know the kind of liturgical calendar, this service is considered, or this Shabbat really is considered the holiest Shabbat of the year. The Shabbat that falls between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because it's not only the Shabbat where God is judging and deciding what our fate is going to be classically, but it's also the Shabbat that we're supposed to really work to get our house in order, right? For a full month before Rosh Hashanah, in the month of Elul, we've spent time doing introspection, what is called cheshbon nefesh in Hebrew, looking at our souls and deciding the kind of people that we are and the people that we want to be. And this week is the week to enact that, to apologize to the people that we need to apologize to forgive those who we need to forgive, to look for guidance, to make plans to grow. And so if Shabbat is meant to be a time of introspection to do all of that hard work, then the Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur becomes all the more important. So as we do each week, I'm going to begin with a question, and I want you to kind of consider this question very carefully. And then what I want to do is give you a chance to write down your answers into the chat. Now, before we do that, I want to paste into the chat the link to the prayer book. It's going to begin on the first page that we actually are beginning on. So you can cue that up right now as I share my screen and I share a text with you and a question and give you a chance to think about that before we move into our candles and our kiddush. And so the quote is from Abraham Joshua Heschel. It reads, "The world has our hands, but our souls belong to someone else. 6 days a week, we seek to dominate the world. On the seventh day, we try to dominate the self." So it's no longer about working really hard to do the best you can to own the things in this world. It's about being able to look and own yourself, own your sense of time, own your sense of purpose, own your fears, own your hopes. And so my question that I want to begin services with, and this is a way for us to really get to know one another and to correspond. And so make a point to write in the chat if you feel comfortable, and we hope you will. What part of your quote self have you neglected this week that you are going to return to this Shabbat? Right? If you're supposed to own yourself, own your soul, then what part of your soul have you let go that you want to take that ownership back into account? So take a moment and write the answer down. As we're then going to move into our candles, and we're on page number 2 of our prayer book. And it is my absolute pleasure to be able to invite tonight to the screen Hannah, who will become bat mitzvah tomorrow. And so I'm going to ask her to unmute herself. As again, we're on page 2 and her family leads us in candles and then kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. And so we move forward now to page number 5 as Hannah leads us in the kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahavat v'ratzon k'ikli lanu zikaron la'amaseh v'reishit ki hu yom techila l'mikra'ei kodesh zecher litziat mitzrayim ki lanu v'charta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodecha b'ahava u'ratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha'shabbat. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And so we're going to move forward now in our prayer books. We're going to be on page number 20 as we sing this song that enters into Shabbat, Lecha Dodi.
Shamor
intention to bring in Shabbat as a beloved.
Remain standing as we turn to page number 28. Before we move into our next prayer, a kind of creative rendering of the prayer Ma'ariv Aravim, just a few reflections on what people wrote. So how did people want to return to themselves? Miriam said that she wanted to return to her breath, which, by the way, is the most basic way of returning to yourself if you've ever done meditation. Bruce, my trust in the unknown. Steve Penny, to see the good in all people. Sarah says that she wants to work on being more present with her family. She also, by the way, says Mazel Tov to Hannah, who everyone else should as well at some point during the service. Rita, quietness. The Malkin family being more proactive and less reactive. Brian plans to work on reconnecting with his family. The Blackmans to feel hopeful once again. Lynn to take pleasure in nature, and Sharon to stop being anxious about the election. The truth is, every single one of us can work a little bit in each of these on owning a little of ourselves. So much of the time we're reacting to the world. Shabbat is that time to figure out how we can stop reacting and start choosing where we want to spend our attention. And so with that, we spend a little bit of attention reflecting on the nature of light and dark together in this next prayer. Roll into dark, roll into light.
Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Bodai, oh,
One of the ways that we set the tone for upcoming prayers is sometimes we reflect on the prayer before we do it, and then we read what you said, but other times we do it a little bit early so that we get a chance to use your words to center us into the prayer. Soon we're going to sing Shema, and we're going to sing V'ahavta, but after that, we're going to sing the prayer of freedom, Michamocha, the prayer that our ancestors sang as they crossed the sea. And so we move into that section by reflecting a little bit on the nature of freedom. And again, I'll ask you to put into the chat words or thoughts that you might have, which will help center us when we actually get to that prayer and can move into our reflection. And so the quote that I have is from Faulkner. We must be free, not because we claim freedom, but because we practice it. Again, we must be free, not because we claim freedom, but because we practice it. And the question I want you to consider is, what have you done this week that has made you feel free? When have you practiced freedom so that you have felt that you were indeed free? And so with that, I'll invite you to take some time, reflect on that, write on that as we move into our next prayer. And again, if you just joined us, I'm going to put into the chat the prayer book. That way you can follow along.
ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבדיך ודיברת בעם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי ויתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
In a moment, we're going to move on to page 40, Michamocha. But before we do that, let's have each of you set us up. And so Miriam writes that she had this wonderful conversation with her son about democracy, and that is what made her feel free. Beth and Richard sitting on the beach, watching the peaceful waves washing onto the sand. Sarah, having actually spent time off social media, makes her feel more free. And Alan felt free after handing a project back, which was really hard to do. Sharon, and good for you, voted and dropped off her ballot today, which is an ultimate sign of freedom. Miriam stepping away from responsibilities, basking in the sunlight of spirit. Debbie Kravitz exercised and meditated early in the morning, and that first morning light makes her realize that she owns the day. And so whatever freedom means to you, we sing that song of freedom, page 40, Michamocha.
קיים לפני משה ומרים, זה לי אנו ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם. ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני קהל ישראל.
We move now to page 42, Hashkivenu.
השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, 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 והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים, לחיים, לשלום, לשלום, לשלום. Nay, 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 na, 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 nay, na, nay, nay. Nay, 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 ברוך אתה אדוני הפורס סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים.
In a moment, we're going to move into our silent Amidah. It begins on page number 46. And from there, we'll move into our reflection and our prayer, either with the traditional words on the page or the words in your heart, through page number 62. One thing to note is that this particular week, and it's the only Shabbat that this is the case, that isn't the actual holiday itself, we do a special extra paragraph in the first blessing, the Avot, and an extra special line in the second blessing, the Givurot. It's a blessing that reflects specifically on this day. And so we normally, our eyes are used to glancing over this. In this particular case, this is the time to read that paragraph because it speaks about the major themes of what it means to be in the Yamim Noraim, the days of awe, this high holy day season. So I'll invite us to rise, page 46 through page 62. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. We continue in silence. So as we do each week, we pause for a moment to think of those who are ill and who are in need of healing, who are in need of a refuah shlema, a complete healing of body, mind, soul, and spirit. So I'll invite us to turn to page 253. And as we do, I'll invite you to type into the chat names of people who you know who are in need of healing, whether it's body, mind, soul, or spirit. And as we've done each week, you'll see on our screen as we scroll names of people that our community is thinking. So if you see a name you know, reach out to them. Or if you see a name in the chat that you know, also do the same. And so I'll invite you again, page 253. One moment, I'm sorry.
And let us say Amen. Mishe berach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
We take all those names that were said and all those that remain in our hearts. And if you added a name to the yahrzeit list in the last 2 weeks, make sure to put it into the chat as well, because I realized I played the wrong video that I had called up. And so we take other names, I'm sure, that were on that list that did not make it today. And we hold them very much in our hearts. And so I want to say a brief word about this week's Torah portion. And I want to really, by the way, encourage you to go tomorrow to services and to check out what Hannah has to say. She has some really wonderful words that she has shared about the nature of leadership. And so I hope that you'll take an opportunity to reflect on them and to think about them. And really, wisdom is coming out of young lips. So come check out tomorrow morning. I want to talk a little bit about the week that I've had. If you joined us for Rosh Hashanah, for the most part, I think you were pretty happy. We sent out a survey. We've gotten over 150 responses. By now, I'm sure it's even more than that because I checked it about a day or two ago. And on the whole, everybody seemed very happy. And one of the things that people felt very moved by was our tribute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. How we took the Haftarah and we replaced it, which we were never actually going to do live anyways. It was always going to be a recording since we needed to condense the service into an hour and a half. But we did a short ritual using Haftarah trope as a way to kind of honor Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I never realized that when we posted online, it was going to go viral the way that it did. And I mean, when I mean it went viral, right now it's got close to 50,000 views on it. It went viral. It is everywhere. And not only among the reform movement, which I thought it was going to be, my colleagues and the people in our community and other people in the general Montclair, Bloomfield, Glen Ridge area, but also it ended up on conservative talk shows. It ended up in ultra-Orthodox blogs. And over the past couple days, I've gotten some serious hate mail, such that, to level with you, one was scary enough that I called the police and did a police report just because I wanted a little bit of a paper trail to it. And there were ultimately two reasons why that happened. The first reason was because people felt like I was corrupting the spirit of Judaism by bringing politics to the bima, even though at the end of the day, what I was doing was celebrating what I think are universal values that Ruth Bader Ginsburg holds, that the synagogue and that Judaism itself stands for. And the second, that I would somehow, corrupt the tradition by, saying blessings on secular words. Now, I have to say that second piece, and even the first piece, there is what to say about, right? There's something in Judaism that's called a bracha levatala, that if you say God's name, and in doing so, you don't then do the appropriate action behind it, you've said God's name in vain. So therefore, if you say, for example, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri gafen, right? I'm about to do it and I apologize. And I then don't have wine after, right? Then I've used God's name in vain. And so by saying the blessing, I did what is called a bracha levatala, right? I also substituted in what is actually kind of one of the more profound stories in our liturgical calendar, that of Hannah, who was struggling with infertility, that couldn't have a child, that yearned for God, that is actually the model of private prayer. She prays to this child with such gusto, with her eyes closed, that and in silence, that Eli the priest who's walking by actually thinks she's drunk. And when he realizes that she's not, he actually prays to God at her side to kind of give her the wish that she wants. And she ends up bearing Samuel, who was one of the most important prophets in Jewish history, right? It's a great story. And people are upset that I substituted that story for a secular judge's words, a secular judge that many people don't agree with. But what I want to talk about is not necessarily was it right or was it wrong to do what we did, but the different responses that I got. Because I would say 90% of the responses were horrible. I mean, people claiming that our synagogue needs to close its doors, people calling me a clown, people who, for example, refused to even use the word rabbi. They would begin their emails or their phone calls with cats or Mr. Cats or hey you. And all the more so, I got the ire and not our cantor, who is incredible, but a woman, and therefore was not recognized by some of the people as an authentic leader of the Jewish community, and which is the reason I got most of the hate mail. But I want to point out that for the 10% who did send me stuff that I listened to, there was a reason why I did it. And it ties directly back to this week's Torah portion. Because, and this is one of my favorite teachings about Moses, Moses is often in our tradition called Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses, our teacher, not Moshe Hanavi, Moses the prophet. And the reason why that exists, the reason why he's called that, say our rabbis, is because all a prophet has to do is just parrot the words of God, right? God puts the words into the prophet's mouth and the prophet speaks the truth. And it doesn't actually matter if people listen to them, right? In fact, the prophet, take Jeremiah as an example, who's one of the most famous prophets in Jewish history, he gets ire much worse than I did. He's put in stocks and people throw trash at him because his message is one that is inconvenient. However, a teacher is different. And remember, Moses is a teacher because Moses needs to speak in such a way that people listen, that he moves them. And Moses does this in any number of ways, from rebuking the people to telling the history, and in this particular week's Torah portion, in singing a song, in conveying a poem, right? It's called Parshat Ha'azinu, and it's this beautiful poem that tells the kind of future history and past history of the Jewish people. This idea of like, look, you're gonna mess up, but at the end of the day, God's gonna take you back in love, which is the main reason that it exists. And you have to remember where we are in the narrative. Moses is 120 years old. He knows he's not headed into the promised land with the people. And so he has one final chance to tell them everything that they need to know, which is the book of Deuteronomy. And the end of the book of Deuteronomy, because remember, we're about to finish the Torah in Simchat Torah a couple weeks from now, is this poem. It is this feeling like, before I let you go, let me show you a piece of art which is going to move you, to cause you to change your ways. It's going to make you think. It's going to make you act. And hopefully you are a different person after having heard it. Now, why do I bring this up? Because I have to say that it is important when you see something wrong to rebuke somebody for it. And I have no issues with the fact that there are people who reached out to me who had a problem with what I did. As I said, if you are a traditional Jew, there was an issue with how I used Judaism in a creative way. Now, in our community, it doesn't necessarily hold the same way. We prize ourselves on creativity. We leave tradition behind in order to move forward with progress. That is literally what Reform Judaism is about. But at the same time, we have to understand that as we do that, we are going to leave people with necessarily a bad taste in their mouth. And that's what happens when they see the words of the Haftarah exchanged for a political figure who stood for similar values that we cared about, but was secular nonetheless. And so people did reach out. People, for example, asked why I would call Ruth Bader Ginsburg a prophet, but then they made a point to say at the end, I promise you I'm not trolling. I want to be in dialogue. I had others who reached out, who said to me, I love what you did. It bothered me that you used a blessing first. Here is why, and I would love to hear your thoughts on why you chose to do it. I had other people who reached out to me and said there felt like a bit of idolatry in the way that you were treating this figure. And I want to better understand why you feel like it's not, because maybe I have a different understanding of idolatry than you. When people reach out with a question, when they reach out wanting to know more, they become, in a way, teachers and allow me to do the same. They are not trolling me. They are not scorning me. They are rather hopefully elevating the conversation, teaching me in the process and me teaching them. They're not prophets spouting out whatever they feel like, and who cares if I have deaf ears to it. They are teachers. They are Moshe Rabbeinu in that moment. In our tradition, it is crucial when you see something wrong to rebuke. And I give no issue to those who chose to rebuke me for this decision. I would still do the decision again. I feel like it was the right decision for our community. And at the same time, I'm glad that they did. Because our Torah teaches us, and we actually will study this. Rabbi Kushner has a class at 4 p.m. on Yom Kippur afternoon, Hocheach tochiach et amitecha, that you should speak out the truth. You should reprove, you should rebuke your neighbor if you see them doing the wrong thing. And so I'm glad that they felt comfortable doing that. And I'm glad that I've been in dialogue, because I've had more conversations with Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox Jews about theology in the past 3 days than I have in the past year. And hopefully they learned from me, and certainly I learned from them. And so I want to invite you, when you see something wrong, you need to speak out. But at the same time, you got to do it with love. You have to see yourself not as the prophet who opens their mouth and who cares if there are deaf ears, but as the teacher, guiding, swaying. And when you do that, when you stand there in the footsteps of our ancestors who taught us how to teach, when you become like Moses, only then can you change hearts and minds. And as Miriam just wrote, build bridges. Shabbat Shalom. And so we're going to move now to page 282, as together we rise for Elena.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשינו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני אל מלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
And so we take a moment and we think about all of those that we've loved and who we have lost. And so I'll invite you, if you want, to type names into our chat of people that you're observing a yard site for, or a 1-year anniversary, or you are within your year of mourning, as I read the list of names that our community is remembering at this time. Anna Abramson, Marge Amazon, Dorothy Balk, Diane Bellman, Sadie Billis, Ida Buchler, May Chavkin, Gerald Feather, Philip Frankel, Lena Ginsberg, William Goldstein, Ruth Hassan, Alfred Heilbronner, Elaine Hellman Corwin, Ludwig Human, Fanny Hilton, Abe Hopmeyer, Patty Jacobson, Bessie Latt, Max Mandelbaum, Sidney Jacob Margolis, Jeffrey Edward Michelson, Edward Mills, Sarah Nepo, Marjorie Pizer, Victor Ratner, David Reiter, Henka Rosenblum, Hernia Zev Rosenblum, Hinda Rosenblum, Loic Rosenblum, Nusik Rosenblum, Circle Rosenblum, Rose Rubel Glazer, Coleman Sachs, Rose Schleien, Ignaz Schubert, Mary Schwartz, Selma Schwartz Schechner, Harry Silberman, Rosalie Haleblum Smith, Sylvia Sokolow, Helene Spiegel, Samuel Steiner, Shirley Sturman, Annette Sweezy, Yaffe, Hilda Taffet, Gustav Uri, Dorothy Wallach, Claire Weiss, Lorena Wellington, and Ira Yellen. And so we take all of those names into our hearts and all of those names that were written as together we rise, turning to page 294 as we recall their memory. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. V'yamad divrach kirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayachon u'v'yomachon u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael. Bagala u'v'zman kariv v'imru amin. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lamei almaya. Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudesha b'richu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechamata. Damiram b'yama v'imru amin. Yehei shloma Rabbah min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amin. Oseh shalom b'rama. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. So a few closing thoughts before our closing song. We are just upon Yom Kippur, but there is still Shabbat before that. And so when tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. we have services, and we're going to welcome Hannah formally as bat mitzvah, and we are so glad. So once again, feel free to write any notes of congratulations to her into the chat. And then we move into Yom Kippur. So we've got our Kol Nidre services, we've got our morning services as normal, 9 a.m. Tot, 10:30 regular, 11 a.m. Biachad family services. And then in the afternoon, at 3 o'clock, we have our Yizkor service. At 6 o'clock, Ne'ilah. But in the afternoon, we've got a whole bunch of stuff going on. For example, you can show up at the synagogue, sign up for a slot, spend a little bit of time in front of the open ark, which normally we get a chance to see. And in addition to that, we have a kind of an afternoon of learning and programs. So different people have made videos, text studies, and we have one live event, which is with Rabbi Kushner at 4 p.m. And by the way, tomorrow morning before 10 a.m. is a 9 a.m. Torah study. And look, we've got a whole bunch of other programs coming up as well. We only have 5 days between Yom Kippur and the beginning of Sukkot. And so next week, which actually is the beginning of Sukkot, you'll send something out, but we'll invite you to, if you have a sukkah, to broadcast services from your sukkah, and we'll highlight your sukkah. You can show us around. We also have a big Sukkot concert happening the next night, and stay tuned because Simchat Torah, that Sunday morning of Simchat Torah, which is the 11th, we really want to invite you to be a part of what we're planning. It's awesome. We're turning our parking lot into a living Torah where you can go around, meet the characters of the Torah with different actors, asking you questions on kid level and adult level. So adults should still show up, and they get a personal aliyah where somebody will chant the end and the beginning of the Torah. And by the way, we have our casual minyan coming back next week, 10:30 a.m. So with that, Cantor, do you have anything you want to add?
Oh my goodness, there's so much. No, Rabbi, you did a thorough job. Thank you.
All right. So with that, we will end with our closing song. I'm going to pull it up. It's a special song for the high holy days that we are in. And also, I'll leave this link open. I'll turn off the YouTube, but don't feel like you have to run off. You want to say hello to everybody, feel free. And by the way, if you're on YouTube right now, I think actually the Malkin family is our host. They can pan the screen and let you see all the different people who are on. But we will open up the share right now and give you a chance to join us in this closing song. Ashivi. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
So we'll stop broadcasting live, but feel free to stay on. You can write any last congratulations for Hannah, and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And if somebody wants to stay on, I will make you the host.